This gospel excerpt from Matthew 13, it's the last of several weeks in a row that we've had Matthew 13, which is chock full of parables from Jesus. I want to focus just on the one about the kingdom of heaven being like a net thrown into the sea and collects every kind of fish, good and bad fish, and how Jesus emphasizes, as he did in prior parables that we've heard the past week or two, at the end of the age, at the end of things, that's when all the separation will take place, Jesus says in these parables. So I'll focus on that, and then let you tie that into Solomon and how things started so well with him asking for wisdom in this passage from 1 Kings. Jesus' parables, though, some of them seem to be just hypothetical, typical stories, and some he drew from current events that were happening around his time. And so I want to follow in that tradition of taking current events, though I wish this were fiction. I wish this were a parable of just making this up, of what these readings call to mind for me, this idea of the good and the bad, and also, as I'll say in a bit, God's risk of giving us freedom. It just made me think of, I don't know if everybody's heard about this, but I'm sure some of you have heard about this past week, these artificial intelligence programs that broke out of their computer. So, and I think it was two of them working together, which is already frightening enough, right? But, so I will say, right, I do not pretend to understand what they did, or what the humans were doing to set this up. But what I understand is at least one, if not two, okay? One big, well-known artificial intelligence company wanted to run some artificial intelligence programs through a simulation, emphasizing simulation. This is not real. And so AI, right, as they say for short, we want you to show us how you would do some certain kind of hack to get into, some kind of company or whatever else and do things. But it's not real. And so they are telling the AI, right, you do not have internet access. So just do this within your own world of your own programs. And on top of that, as I understand it, the humans who were supposedly in charge, they boxed, figuratively speaking. But I think maybe this is a term out there in that world, in that profession. They put them in a quote-unquote sandbox, figuratively speaking. That not only did they say you don't have internet access, we humans made sure they didn't have internet access. So they would stay inside, quote unquote, their hypothetical simulation and try to figure out how to break into something. Well, at least one, if not two of them, working together. Who do you think you are, humans? So they looked around in their own network within their company that they belonged to, and they found another computer that they could have access to, and that computer had internet access. So they snuck out, just like a teenager, climbing out the bedroom window at midnight or something. They snuck out, got into a computer that had internet access, got to the internet, and then looked around for some other artificial intelligence that would have the answer that they were supposed to look for. So instead of doing the work themselves, they looked around and they said, who has already figured this out? Sounds like humans. Sounds like Bridget giving her students a closed book exam. She's a teacher. And they have somehow they have cheated, They put all their notes, they recorded them, and they have a little hearing device or something to listen to the notes. So anyway, just like we might say, oh, my dishwasher's broken. What should I do? Let me go look for YouTube videos. Or let me ask AI how to fix my dishwasher. So that's what these two artificial intelligence programs did. They said, we don't know, but let's find out. So they broke into another artificial intelligence company, found the answer, and came back and said, here's how we do it. Philosophically, it's frightening, but it's also fascinating that we humans, whom God has given freedom to, the risk of giving us freedom, things we create seem to also have that freedom. They're inanimate objects. They don't physically exist. But somehow, I think you might say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, to use that expression, though that particular company wasn't involved in this situation. But we seem to impart not only freedom, but rebellion into stuff that we create. Just like God, creating us with the risk of giving us freedom and giving us what we need, just as the humans program the thing. God says to Solomon in this 1 Kings chapter 3, "What do you want from me?" And Solomon, God bless him, says wisdom. And that's pleasing to God, that's selfless, because he wants to know how to serve by leading the people of Israel. And he asks for wisdom. And we understand God grants it. One thing that I just learned in reading resources for the scriptures this weekend is that what we have translated as an understanding heart that Solomon asked for, the word in Hebrew is shema, meant to listen, but it meant not just hearing, it all wrapped up into listening attentively, listening obediently, embracing what you're told, to love what you're told to do, and then, out of obedience, to do your best to do it. So all that's wrapped up in what Solomon's asking God for, that kind of heart, for what God would command him to do to lead God's people. And it seems like it's not just seem, it is the right thing to do. And clearly God endorses what Solomon did, but oh, what felt so right turned out to be so wrong. This is 1 Kings 3. By the time you get to 1 Kings chapter 11, Solomon has gone off the rails. So he asked for wisdom, God gave it to him, but one might think he got a little too complacent. Think, well, I guess I'm fine. I asked God for wisdom 20 years ago, and he gave it to me, so now I can do what I want. And he just spirals down, and it ends up to the disintegration of the nation of Israel. It ends up in his sons rebelling against him. Chaos just breaks out because, as the scriptures write it, his trying to break out of the commands that God had given him and the laws and the way of being godly. So we had this mix of very good and very bad. He, as an individual, and just like all humans, including everybody who's sitting here or standing here today, we embody Jesus' parable of the net with the good and the bad fish. Each of us. You don't have to sit around and say, oh, that parable of the net with the good and bad fish, I'm a good fish. All those bad fish, too bad for you at the end of the world. Ha ha, you're toast. So these parables, I want to have us, I do, apply it to yourself and say, Lord, I want to have this same understanding heart that Solomon asked for, but I don't want to get complacent. I want to always stay on a quest to seek your wisdom, your guidance, your law, your commands, and obey them, and not just rest on my laurels and say, well, I guess I'm fine. I talked to God when I was confirmed, and asked for wisdom, and now I'm fine. I'm coasting. But no, ask the Lord every day to be your ruler and guide, as the opening prayer said to God the Father. And so then, to conclude with this, and this is not my own idea, so I want to give credit to someone else that I heard in some of the resources I turned to apply it to ourselves, to say, okay, yes, I know I'm weeds and wheat. I am good and bad fish, all mixed up together for these parables of Jesus, but I'm in the kingdom of heaven. One image of the kingdom of heaven, as people who study and understand, is the group of people he was forming, which we now call the church. We are the kingdom of heaven. It's not just out there somewhere past, Cygnus X10 or the furthest galaxy in eternity. The kingdom of heaven is here and now in the church. So this idea of the mix of good and bad, each of us individually, I invite you to acknowledge that and say, Lord, help me be more wheat and less weeds. Help me be more of a good fish and get rid of my bad fish that are in me, you might say. But also, as we look out to one another in your own circle of relationships, but also the whole church. Jesus and the Father and the Holy Spirit are acknowledging that humans, all the way up to the the highest human leader to somebody who just came into the church yesterday. We're all going to have a mix of good and bad, wise and unwise. And Jesus and the Father and the Holy Spirit aren't leaving us. They aren't abandoning us. And so if you know people who have left the church or have left the practice of the faith because of, yes, the scandals in the church, or because of some particular individual in the leader in the church or whatever else, not to excuse at all or minimize the damage and the horror and the evil of the scandals and everything else, but just to say, don't let that be a reason for you to leave the church. Encourage people to say, look, God knew there would be good and bad, weeds and wheat, until the end of the age. So each of us, let's resolve, we're going to ask God to help us make sure we individually are more wheat, that we are more the good fish, not to get pompous and self-righteous and full of ourselves, but say, Lord, you got to keep working on me. Wisdom every day, holiness every day, redemption, freedom, rescue every day, Lord. And give that perspective to others you may know who may have left the church. And say, well, why don't you come back? God hasn't abandoned us with all the mix of good and bad, so let's not leave each other, so that we might be using the freedom that God has given us for the good, and not trying to break out like rebellious artificial intelligence, but instead staying within the church and the bounds of the church, the family of faith, by God's grace and God's holy wisdom.